room, maybe some 20 or 30 devotees were there in a small room. I forgot the Maharaj's name who was speaking a couple of years back. Satswarup Maharaj or somebody, yes, maybe. So this is what about Prabhuji, and he's, Prabhuji always has a lot of outreach to students, especially students of New York University, and you will see Prabhuji's style of talking, and you understand it is purely teaching, so that we can, if we are really in a mood, we can observe a lot of things, and hopefully it will help us to take a step forward in the right direction. And you happen to go anytime to New York and go to the Bhakti Center, just if you get a chance, please meet Prabhuji. So Prabhuji, welcome to the our satsang Saturday evening, and thank you for accepting our invitation in short notice, and we are really grateful. Hopefully, we will not leave you. You can leave us. So we will keep in touch as long as satsang is there. So with this, I welcome you, and thank you once again for giving your time for us this evening. Please welcome and take it from here, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Rath Yatra Prabhu. Thank you so much. Just today I was seeing there's Rath Yatra in San Francisco happening right now. I was thinking of you.
Oh, we missed it, Prabhuji. Oh, sorry.
So let me get started with some prayers. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnanan Janashalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, Hare Krishna, dear devotees. First of all, thank you so much, Rath Yatra Prabhu, for inviting me to be amongst such amazing devotees. I seek the blessings of all the assembled Vaishnavas so that I can speak something in line with Guru Parampara, something that will help all of us in our journeys towards Krishna. There are several interesting themes that come from these two pastimes of Bharat Maharaj and Indradyumna Maharaj. For example, both faced failures. Both did not achieve spiritual success in their immediate lives. Both became animals in their next lives. Both were tested on how absorbed they were in their Krishna consciousness. Both were tested on their sadhanas. These are questions that come up in our lives too. What if I fail in my spiritual path? What if I'm not practicing my sadhana properly? Is compassion good? If yes, if compassion is actually good, then what Bharat Maharaj did towards the deer, he showed compassion towards the deer. Was that bad? The overall themes that we will discuss today are as follows. First thing is that, will the Lord always protect me? Second thing is, what is my dharma? Third theme is, what if I fail in this life? What's going to happen to me? The fourth theme is, how should I be absorbed in my Krishna consciousness? And ultimately, what will that absorption give me? Is there any benefit for me being absorbed in my spiritual practices? So before we discuss the philosophy and pastimes, I would like to share a joke. So there was a patient who was in a surgery room or the operation theater, He was about to get a major surgery done. At that point, just before he was given anesthesia, he jumped out of the bed and ran away from the operation theater. He ran outside the hospital too and ran to his home. His family members asked him, "Hey, you're supposed to be in the hospital room. Why did you run away from there? You were supposed to get your surgery done right now." He said, while I was about to get the surgery done and they were about to give me anesthesia, the nurse said to me, "Don't worry, everything will be okay. Don't worry, everything will be okay." She said it multiple times. The family members asked him, "Yes, that is the duty of the nurse. Nothing wrong in calming the patient." At that moment, he responded, "The nurse was not talking to me. She was talking to the doctor who was going to operate me." So similarly, I also feel like that doctor, totally unqualified to be speaking to all of you today about these wonderful pastimes. But I begin by praying to Srimad Bhagavatam, which provides the best shelter even to unqualified people like me. Now, Srimad Bhagavatam was written by God. It is about God, and the output is also God, in the sense that it was written by Srila Vyasadeva, who was the incarnation of God. The entire book is about God, and the output, which is the book, is also God, because like the book Bhagavata, we call it. We can't say this about anything else. Written by God, it is about God, and it is God. So please bear with me while we share some lessons about handling reversals in life. There are many similarities between these two amazing souls, Bharat Maharaj and Indradyumna Maharaj, and there are several differences as well. So before we dive into the pastimes, I want to discuss a little bit philosophy. So let's start by discussing 4 main reasons why we do any activity. So this is from Chaitanya Shikshamrita by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Let's start with the lowest level for doing any activity. And I don't mean just spiritual activity. This could be any material activity also. So the lowest level is fear. We can think of many examples. We may work because we are fearful that we might lose our jobs and our paychecks. We may go to school in fear of our parents. We may go to the temple in fear that if we don't go, the Lord will punish us. In fact, during my childhood, I used to go to the temple because my mom used to always tell me that if you don't go to the temple, the Lord will punish you. So in one sense, I was going to the temple in fear. The next level of doing any activity is reciprocation. So we could be going to work because we are getting something out of it. What are we getting? We are getting a paycheck. We could be going to temple to ask something for the Lord. It's almost like a business deal. So this is not the highest level either. The next level is duty. So duty is clearly higher than fear and reciprocation, but it is still not the highest. Duty is having a sense of doing something consistently, doing something constantly. Duty is like our dharma that we have to do. With the same examples of school and work, let us consider that it is my duty to go to the temple every Sunday. That could be our motive. Every Sunday, it is my duty that I have to go to the temple. It is my duty or dharma to work so that I can take care of my family. Duty can put us in the mode of goodness. But is that always a good thing? Maybe, maybe not. If we get trapped in this mode of goodness, it can put us in pride. The good side, however, of mode of goodness is that it can spring us into the mode of pure goodness, Shuddha Sattva stage. We will discuss an example to illustrate this shortly. But before that, as I mentioned, duty is not the highest level. So can anyone guess what the highest reason should be for doing any activity? You can unmute and speak, please.
Love, Prabhu.
Yes, thank you, Prabhu. So the highest reason for doing any activity ideally should be love. So ideally, we should be going to school for the love of learning something. Ideally, we should be going to work for the love of what we do at work. Ideally, we should be going to the temple purely out of love for Krishna. But ideal is not always easy. It is not always possible to do everything in love. I have given some practical examples about school and work and temple and so on. Now, let's look at it from a spiritual angle through the lens of the three modes. Fear is in the mode of ignorance. Reciprocation is in the mode of passion. Duty is in the mode of goodness, as we mentioned. And love is in the mode of pure goodness. Now, Srila Prabhupada mentioned several times that if we are in the mode of goodness, it becomes easier to go into the mode of pure goodness. But staying in the mode of goodness for too long is not recommended. Now, what do I mean by this? Now, Srila Prabhupada gave the example that the mode of goodness is like an airport. You go there to take off immediately. If you stay there for too long, it can be detrimental. Let me illustrate this with one simple example. Okay. So the point is, don't get stuck in duty, grow beyond it. So what is the example? So the example that I'm going to share is about a dutiful Brahmin who would wake up every day at a certain time. Okay. He would wake up at, say, 4:30 a.m. every morning and chant the Gayatri mantra. It so happened that one day he was not able to wake up at 4:25 because he had slept late the previous night. At exactly 4:25, someone woke him up. He did not even bother to see who woke him up. But the fact that he woke up at 4:25 made him very happy. And he immediately started chanting the Gayatri mantra. So he felt good that he had never broken his vow. Later on, he started pondering, who was it that woke me up? Who was that person who woke me up at 4:25 and let me chant the Gayatri mantra? It turns out that it was actually Kali. It turns out that it was Kali personified that woke him up at 4:25. Now, this is interesting. You may all wonder that why would Kali wake him up at 4:25 so that he can chant the Gayatri mantra? Because he was proud that he was doing this daily activity as a ritual. He was actually proud that he was doing every single day, waking up at 4:30, chanting the Gayatri. He was just extremely proud about it. Basically, what was happening was he was stuck in the mode of goodness. Kali woke him up so that he would not get humbled and stay in that prideful state. Kali wanted him to remain in that state of pride. And that is why he woke him up. Srila Rupa Goswami, in his famous Padyavali, writes a nice verse which talks about exactly this point. I will put the verse here. So he says, pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness cannot be had even by pious activity in hundreds and thousands of lives. Pious activity is done in the mode of goodness. So just that, even hundreds and thousands of lives will not take you to Shuddha Sattva or pure devotional service. It can be attained only by paying one price. What is that price? That is the intense greed to obtain it. If it is available somewhere, one must purchase it without delay. So if one wants to move from goodness to pure goodness, what should they do? They must just have the intense desire or the intense greed to obtain that pure devotional service. That is all that we can do. That is all that we can aspire for. So now that we have talked about pure goodness and ultimate goodness, let's see the definition of pure bhakti, or it's also known as Uttama Bhakti. So this is from Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu, where clearly the definition of a pure bhakti is defined in 4 characteristics. Anyabhilashita shunyam, jnana karmadi anavritam, anukulyena, Krishna anushilanam, bhaktir uttama. So the 4 characteristics that are mentioned are Anya Abhilashita Shunyam. That's the first characteristic. What does that mean? It means no other desire other than the desire to please the Supreme Lord. Jnana Karmadi Anavritam. What does that mean? Our devotion should not be covered over by jnana or karma. It is not jnana karmadi shunyam, it is jnana karmadi anavritam. So it should not be covered over. We can have a little bit of jnana and karma because we are acting in this world, we are thinking, we are not blindly following, but we must make sure that jnana and karma don't cover our devotion. The next characteristic is anukulyena. Anukulyena is an important characteristic. What it means is that our devotion should be done in a favorable attitude. It should be done in a pleasing attitude. Anukulyena, pleasing, favorable. The last characteristic is Krishna Anushilanam. What this means is that we must be doing some kind of constant, continuous service, consistent service. So Anushilanam means consistent service. So these are the 4 characteristics of Uttama Bhakti. So now our acharyas have explained that there are 2 primary characteristics out of these 4 and 2 secondary characteristics. The 2 primary characteristics are known as Mukhya Lakshanas, and the 2 secondary characteristics are known as Gauna Lakshanas. So what is primary characteristics? Primary characteristics are those that if you remove them, there is no bhakti at all. And secondary characteristics or Gauna Lakshana are those that if you remove them, bhakti will still remain, but it won't be Uttama Bhakti. So I'll pause here for a second and see if anybody can identify out of these 4, the 2 primary characteristics. Remember, primary characteristics means if you remove them, there is no bhakti at all. So out of these 4, the 4 are Anya Abhilashita Shunyam, Jnana Karmadi Anavritam, Anukulyena, and Krishna Anushilanam. Does anybody want to try?
Number 1, Prabhuji.
Number 1 is primary characteristic, you're saying, Prabhu?
I think so, Prabhuji, yes.
Okay. Anyone else?
Anushilanam is secondary characteristic, Prabhu.
So any primary characteristics, Prabhuji? What are the primary characteristics? I can tell you that so far nobody is right.
Number 4, Prabhuji.
Yes. So number 3 and number 4, Anukulyena and Krishna Anushilanam are the primary characteristics. That means we must perform devotion favorably and we must perform something consistently, consistent seva. If we do these things, Prabhus, that is primary characteristic or Mukhya Lakshana of Uttama Bhakti. Now the other 2 are interesting. Anya Abhilashita Shunyam and Jnana Karmadi Anavritam. These are secondary characteristics. What that means is, even without these, bhakti will still go on, but these 2 make it Uttama Bhakti. So let me explain a little bit. So what is Anya Abhilashita Shunyam? That means there has to be no other desire other than to please the Lord. For example, I could be performing bhakti to get liberation. Now, I have a goal. I have a goal of liberation. That means it is not Anya Abhilashita Shunyam. So it is still bhakti, but it is not Uttama Bhakti. I hope that is clear. The next one is Jnana Karmadi Anavritam. If our bhakti is covered over by jnana or karma completely, then it becomes Jnana Mishra Bhakti or Karma Mishra Bhakti. Both of these are not pure Bhakti. Out of these four, dear devotees, Anukulyena is the most important, and I'll explain why. And this one can be misinterpreted or misunderstood. So I will explain this one particular characteristic of Anukulyena. But so what does Anukulyena mean? It means favorable or with a pleasing attitude. So let's go to that. So there are two possible definitions of Anukulyena. So one definition could be that which is pleasing to Krishna. The other definition could be that which is done for pleasing Krishna. So these two look very similar. Let's take a couple of examples. Let's take the examples of the demons who attacked Krishna. So the Keshi demon, Chanur, Mushtika, Kamsa, and so on. When they were fighting with Krishna, apparently it was pleasing to Krishna. It was definitely pleasing to Krishna. But were they performing bhakti? They were definitely not performing bhakti. So the correct definition is that which is done for pleasing Krishna. Let's take another example to demonstrate this. Let's take the example of Yashoda Mai. When Yashoda Mai put Krishna down from her lap to take care of the boiling milk, it apparently did not please Krishna. Krishna started to cry. But she was doing it so that she could take care of the milk, which was meant to make milk sweets for Krishna, which was meant to make yogurt for Krishna. In other words, she did that to please Krishna. The activity was done for pleasing Krishna, even though apparently it appears that it did not please Krishna. Similarly, we must do our activities for pleasing Krishna, and that is bhakti. Okay, so let's move on to one last point I want to make about this particular verse. So there are four characteristics that we mentioned here. There are several verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam, in Bhagavad Gita. Whenever pure devotional service is mentioned, these four characteristics keep appearing in it. For example, Anya Abhilashita Shunyam maps to Sarvopadi Vinirmuktam. So this verse is from the Narada Pancharatra. And then Jnana Karmadi Anavritam maps to Nirmalam. Anukulyena maps to Tat Paratvena. Krishna Anushilanam maps to Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam. And Bhaktir Uttama maps to Bhaktir Uchyate. So this shows one-on-one mapping between what is pure devotional service, and this appears, as I said, several times in Bhagavad Gita and other places. Whenever pure devotional service is defined, you'll find these four characteristics. So now that we have discussed some philosophy, let's discuss some pastimes. First and most important is that when we talk about pure devotional service, on this path, on this journey towards Krishna, we always have a choice. Moment by moment, we have a choice. Are we loving Krishna more, or are we loving our false ego more? The example that I would like to share, or the pastime that I would like to share, is between Duryodhan and Arjuna, which all of you are well aware, I'm sure. So this was the time just before the Kurukshetra war, when Arjuna and Duryodhan approached Krishna. Krishna had made it clear that he would not fight in the battle, but he would give his huge Narayani Sena. Arjuna and Duryodhan had the option of choosing one or the other. They could choose Krishna, who was not going to fight, or the Narayani Sena. Even though Duryodhan came early and Arjuna came late, when Krishna opened his eyes, he first saw Arjuna, because Arjuna was at Krishna's lotus feet. Krishna told Arjuna that he can go first. He can ask first. He can ask his request first. Because of two reasons. First is because Krishna saw Arjuna first, and also because Arjuna was the younger of the two cousins. So what did Arjuna choose? What did Duryodhan choose? It's a very important lesson for us. So Duryodhan had more faith in Krishna's energies than in Krishna. What did Arjuna choose? Arjuna said, Krishna, I just want you and you alone. This is the important point for us. This characteristic of choosing Krishna exclusively is called ananyata, or exclusive devotion. Duryodhana, on the other hand, had more faith, as I mentioned, in Krishna's energies than in Krishna. He was eagerly looking forward to getting that huge, vast army. So Duryodhana was very happy, actually, when Arjuna chose Krishna. So Duryodhana was actually fighting for the wrong cause. He was actually fighting for his own ego. Similarly, we also have these material desires that can actually conquer us, cheat us, and trap us. So the senses look outward towards sense objects. The sense objects that are captured, that we capture, actually start programming our mind. The output of the mind is more and more desires for more sense objects. So it's actually a trap in one sense. The senses look out towards sense objects, we capture the sense objects, and they program our mind for more and more desires for more sense objects. So I would like to share one funny example here. So this is a true story. I mean, it happened in the railway stations in India. There was a person who was selling these hand fans, because of the heat of the sun. The hand fans are very popular in railway stations. So he was selling this hand fans for 25 paisa, and other shopkeepers were selling the same hand fans for 5 rupees. So one passenger saw that this was a great deal. I should quickly go get it. So he ran towards that shopkeeper and bought the fan for 25 paisa. He started using it. At the first swipe itself, the fan broke. So he got upset. I got this wonderful deal. Now the fan broke. So he ran towards the shopkeeper and told him, hey, you gave me this fan. I tried it once. I swiped once and it immediately broke. So what is this? What's happening here? So the shopkeeper said, you wanted a good deal. You got the deal. But you did not ask me how to use the fan. How you use the fan is you hold the fan and you shake your head. So this is a funny example which teaches us how this material world, the material world, how it actually cheats us, how it actually conquers us, and how it actually traps us. So even as devotees, we are not exempt. We could be dressing the deities in the altar, but in our minds, we could be thinking that I'm doing this and I wonder how many people will praise my dressing, how many people will think that I'm a good dresser, and things like that. So what are we actually doing? His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj says, are we decorating the deities or are we decorating our own false ego? And this can happen multiple times, moment by moment. We have this choice to choose between Krishna or our false ego. Okay, so we talked about how material world can cheat us. Now let's talk about how material world can trap us. Once during a morning walk, Srila Prabhupada was at Venice Beach, California, and he was going for a morning walk with several of his disciples. The sun was rising in the backdrop of beautiful ocean. So some of Srila Prabhupada's disciples who were there mentioned to Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, just see how beautiful this scene is. Srila Prabhupada agreed. Srila Prabhupada answered a very profound statement. He said, this is just like the material world. It is beautiful, but from a distance. The moment you start going close to it, you will get trapped. Okay, so I will give you another example. This was during a yatra of Jagannath Puri by His Holiness Radhanath Swami Maharaj. And devotees were warned not to swim in the ocean on that particular day because there was a high tide. One devotee was overconfident. Please remember, he was overconfident. He said, nothing is going to happen to me. I am an expert swimmer. I can easily swim. I've swam in much more difficult conditions, and I will do it. Ignoring all the warnings, he got into the ocean and started swimming. At one point, he lost control and realized that he was drowning. He started raising his hands, calling out for help. The devotees on the beach were thinking, he's saying, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. One devotee actually realized the actual problem, and he said, he's not saying Hari Bol, he's calling for help. So eventually, that devotee was saved. But the point here is, overconfidence is what gets us in trouble in this world. Devotees who knew a little bit of swimming, or devotees who did not know any swimming, they did not even venture into the ocean. It was only the overconfident swimmer who was caught, who was trapped. So overconfidence gets us in trouble. So there's another important lesson here. The feeling of happiness one gets in this material enjoyment is the enemy of the conditioned soul. So what does this mean? So whenever we start feeling happy, thinking that I'm succeeding in this world, I'm progressing, I'm achieving so many things, and you start becoming overconfident, start becoming more and more and more confident, and that is when the material energy can actually easily trap us. So we must be careful about this. So another example, and this is between Srila Prabhupada and Shyam Sundar Prabhu. In the initial days, this was actually when Shyam Sundar Prabhu was carving the Balaram deity, and he was actually smoking in those days, and he had kept a pack of cigarettes on the Balaram deity while he was carving the Balaram deity. So Srila Prabhupada came there, he saw the pack of cigarettes, he could have chastised him, but he did not. But he said something very profound. He said, don't let this pack of cigarettes come between you and Krishna. And very soon, Shyam Sundar Prabhu got it, and he got rid of the addiction completely. So we may not have cigarettes, but we could have other attachments. For example, a simple example, like a cell phone, right? A simple thing like a cell phone, if we are not using it properly in the service of the Lord, could come between us and Krishna. Okay. So the point is to use whatever we have in the service of the Lord. Otherwise, this material energy is so powerful that it can easily trap us. So let's move on to the other extreme. So one extreme is overconfidence. The other extreme is fear of failure, even in our paths, even in our journeys. So in all our lives, at some point or the other, we get this fear. What if I fail? What if I fail on this path in this life? And that is what we see both in the case of Bharat Maharaj and Indradyumna Maharaj. Both of them, in one sense, they failed in their current lives, right? So we also get this question, what if I can't make it in this lifetime? So let's take a very nice verse from the first canto, 5th chapter, where Narad Muni is telling to Vyasadeva about this point. So Narad Muni is mentioning that, my dear Vyasa, even though a devotee of Lord Krishna sometimes falls down, somehow or the other, he certainly does not undergo material existence like others, like fruity workers. Because a person who has once relished, even a drop, has once relished the taste of the lotus feet of the Lord, can do nothing but remember that ecstasy again and again. So this should actually give us some confidence that now that we are all practicing bhakti in one way or the other, we will never, according to Narad Muni, get back into that material existence like other fruitive workers. So in one sense, it is only success from now. There is no failure in one sense because Krishna's protection is always there. But even if we fail, for whatever reason, even if we fail, we must make sure that we fall within Krishna consciousness, but don't fall away from Krishna. Meaning, We should not move away from this wonderful movement that Srila Prabhupada has given. Also, in this connection, Srila Prabhupada would always tell us that whenever someone walks into the temple room, make sure we take care of them very nicely. Because once they get the taste of bhakti, they will never want to venture again into that material existence. So the next question that comes is, what is my dharma? What is my duty? So in our journey towards God, or in our journey in this material world, we have three main dharmas. The first and the most important dharma is what is called Bhagavad Dharma. This is our constitutional dharma to serve our Lord, right? The second dharma is called conditional dharma or Varnashrama dharma. Even though we understand constitutionally that we are not the body, we are conditionally still in this body. We must practice our Varnashrama dharma properly, in the immediate sense. In the ultimate sense, yes, Bhagavad Dharma is the highest. But in the immediate sense, we must practice Varnashram dharma. The next and the third dharma is called Apad dharma, or it's also known as emergency dharma or circumstantial dharma, where we step down from Varnashram dharma and do something that's against our nature. And this we will elaborate more in the pastime of Bharat Maharaj. And when that happens, we must make sure not to get stuck in Apad dharma. We must always focus back on Bhagavad Dharma. I will elaborate this later. But before we move ahead, the question that comes is, who determines my Varnashram dharma? What determines my Varnashram dharma? The answer is given in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 3, verse 5. So the translation is, everyone is forced to act helplessly according to the qualities he has acquired from the modes of material nature. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. We are all doing some activity or the other all the time because we are bound by these modes of material nature in this world. So now, how do we slowly but surely move from Varnashram dharma to Bhagavad dharma? There is an important characteristic or an important quality that we should aspire for, and that is absorption. Now, what does it mean when we say you must get absorbed in your service, you must get absorbed in your sadhana? What does it mean? So there are two things here. One is, we must have the purity of intention, because without purity of intention, the best actions of our devotion are imperfect. Let's take the example of Hiranyakashipu. He did not have pure intentions. His intention was to get eternal life. So the purity definitely was not there. The purity of intention was not there. But he had intensity of sadhana. Okay. So without intensity of sadhana, you will not achieve the desired results. So both these should be there. We must have pure intentions and we must have intense sadhana. That is absorption. Okay. So even for a moment in a day, if we can cultivate this, getting really absorbed while taking darshan or chanting or doing any of our services, if we get really absorbed with the right intention, with the right intensity of sadhana, then we will start experiencing something wonderful. What is that thing? We will start experiencing God's protection, as we see in the case of Prahlad Maharaj. So the greatest miracle, so usually when we were told initially about the pastime of Prahlad Maharaj, I used to always wonder that the greatest miracle is the protection from death that Prahlad Maharaj received. But an even greater miracle is his absorption remained uninterrupted. The absorption that we talked about, it remained uninterrupted in the case of Prahlad Maharaj. Whether he was thrown into a pit of snakes, whether he was trying to be trampled by an elephant, or any other tortures that he went through, if you look at in all these pictures, his absorption towards the Lord remained uninterrupted. even amidst death threats. So how do we understand further? Okay, so that was Prahlad Maharaj. How do we understand God's protection? So Krishna promises in the Bhagavad Gita, Kaunteya pratijanehi name bhakta pranashyati, in chapter 9, verse 31. So the translation is, O son of Kunti, declare it boldly. Krishna wants Arjuna to declare it boldly that my devotee never perishes. So let's take the example of Parikshit Maharaj for a second to understand this a little bit more deeply. So Parikshit Maharaj in the womb, as we know, was protected by Krishna. But the same Parikshit Maharaj, on the last day of the Bhagavatam recitation, when the Takshak bird came, Takshak snake came, he was not protected. So you can question, so why did Krishna protect Parikshit when he was in the womb? And why did Krishna apparently not protect Parikshit when he was about to get bitten by the snake? This is an interesting thing because Krishna protected in both of these cases actually. In the first case, Krishna protected Parikshit Maharaj materially. But in the second case, Parikshit Maharaj had transcended so much that he did not need any protection in this material world. He had transcended this whole material plane. And he had just heard the Srimad Bhagavatam. So he was actually completely protected, even though we may not apparently see it. So in our cases also, our absorption in Krishna is what will be tested. And this is what also we learn in the pastime of Bharat Maharaj and Indradyumna Maharaj. We'll go deeper into that. But it is this absorption is what will get tested. And it is, if we are absorbed, fully absorbed in Krishna, then that will take us to Krishna. So there are two benefits. One is absorption leads us to protection and it elevates our consciousness. And absorption in Krishna will ultimately take us to Krishna. So now let's look at the similarities between these two great souls, Indradyumna Maharaj and Bharat Maharaj. The first similarity is that both were Rajarishis. The word Rajarishi comes from two words, Raja and Rishi. Raja comes from the word like mode of passion, Rajogun, right? So externally, they were performing prescribed duties nicely in the mode of passion. But internally, they were rishis, they were saints. So internally, they always aspired for something higher. They always aspired for Bhagavad Dharma. Even though externally they were performing Varnashram Dharma, internally they were aspiring for Bhagavad Dharma. That is one similarity between both Bharat Maharaj and Indradyumna Maharaj. The second thing is, after they successfully performed Varnashram Dharma, they both left to the forest to completely and exclusively practice Bhagavad Dharma. That is another similarity. The third similarity is that both of them were tested by Krishna directly or indirectly in the forest. And the last similarity is that both of them took animal bodies in their next life. But interestingly, Krishna's protection was there because they didn't lose their spiritual attractions that they had cultivated in their previous lives. So these are four similarities. Now let's look at the Bharat Maharaj pastime first, and then we look at Indradyumna Maharaj pastime. So an important lesson that we can learn from Bharat Maharaj is this concept of when to show compassion, how much compassion, should we compromise on our sadhana, should we not compromise on our sadhana, and so on. So first let's look at Bharat Maharaj. So Bharat Maharaj's story teaches us the lesson of compassion. How much compassion should we have? So let us elaborate this a little bit. So first of all, a devotee's compassion is born out of his practice of bhakti. The more bhakti you practice, the more compassion develops in your heart. So Bharat Maharaj had mastered the practice of bhakti actually. In fact, he was at the Bhava platform, just one below Prema. He was at the Bhava platform. He had mastered the practice of bhakti. So of course, he had a lot of compassion in his heart. So what is wrong when Bharat Maharaj tried to save and care for the baby deer. A quick background of the pastime. So Bharat Maharaj, while he was meditating, he saw a pregnant doe. A doe is a female deer jumping across the river to escape from a chasing tiger. And while the pregnant deer was jumping across the river, she gave birth to a baby deer, which fell into the river. The mother on the other side passed away immediately after she jumped. Now there was no one to save the baby deer, first of all, and secondly, to take care of the baby deer. So since the mother had passed away, Bharat Maharaj was seeing the whole thing, decided to save the baby deer and started caring for the deer. So was it wrong? Was it wrong for Bharat Maharaj to be the caretaker of the baby deer? Was it wrong for Bharat Maharaj to protect the baby deer? Now, to understand this, let us read a verse from the Padma Puran on this topic. So this verse from the Padma Puran says, he who worships the Lord, Yena Hari Archita, is pleasing to all living entities, and all the inhabitants of the world, both moving and non-moving, are pleasing to him. So in one sense, the compassion that Bharat Maharaj showed towards the deer was not at all wrong. It was not wrong at all. It was necessary. But it was part of his Apad Dharma. As we discussed previously, Apad Dharma is the emergency Dharma. It is that Dharma which you can practice for some time, but you must quickly go back into Bhagavad Dharma. Now, let's look at Bharat Maharaj's situation at that point. He was in Bhagavad Dharma. He was complete. He had given up everything at that point. And he had actually, he had left his country, he had left his kingdom, he had left his family, he had left his relatives to practice Bhagavad Dharma. And that is why he went to the forest. So he had given up his duty of being the caretaker of family, caretaker of kingdom, and so on. So he had renounced his Varnashram responsibilities. He had given up the duty of taking care of anyone, okay, which he had done so well for several years as a Rajarishi. Now, to take the role of a full-fledged caretaker of a deer was not warranted. It's okay to do it for some time as an Apad Dharma, but what happened in his case was that he got so attached to the deer that he got so caught up that thinking that he was the maintainer, he was the protector of the deer, that he started compromising on his sadhana. Now, this is where we have to balance between compassion and compromise. But in the case of Bharat Maharaj, he started compromising on his sadhana. Started compromising so much that he started ignoring and neglecting his spiritual practices completely. As you see in the picture here, he started neglecting whatever he was doing. And it went to such an extent that he started completely stopping his whole practice, his whole spiritual practice. It so happened that even at the time of death, when the deer had gone away somewhere, he was running, looking for the deer. He fell into a well. And while he was dying, he could think only of the deer. He could not think of anything else. He could not think of the Lord at all. Now, even at this time, we can say the Lord's protection was there. Now, how is it that the Lord's protection was there? Because he didn't lose his spiritual attraction towards the Lord, even though he got the body of a deer in his next life. That is how the Lord protects. So let's elaborate this a little bit more, this point about compassion and compromise, and how we can balance it out. So the first thing is, there are many examples in our scriptures which talk about this balance between compassion and compromise. So the first thing we can look at is the entire reason why the Bhagavad Gita was spoken to Arjuna was because Arjuna became extremely compassionate towards relatives on his side of the army and also towards relatives on the other side of the army. It was because of his over compassion that he started compromising on his dharma, and his Gandiva bow slipped from his hand. And Krishna had to reveal the Gita wisdom to Arjuna and make him understand that you cannot compromise on your dharma. And that finally, after the entire Gita wisdom was given, Arjuna was able to take the Gandiva bow again. Another example is Ajamil. Ajamil was actually bewildered by lust when he saw a prostitute embracing another person. In this bewilderment, he lost all compassion. He lost all compassion towards his family members. He lost all sense of duty towards his family members. And he also compromised completely on his sadhana and his spiritual practices. But even in his case, we see that the Lord protected him towards the end of his life because of all the spiritual practices that he had performed earlier in his life. So what is an ideal example? The ideal example of balance between compassion and not compromising on one sadhana is the example of Srila Haridas Thakur. This is a perfect balance of showing compassion and still not compromising on one sadhana. So in this pastime, as all of you know, Ramchandra Khan sent this prostitute to seduce Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur could have done two things. Haridas Thakur, of course, knew that this king, Ramchandra Khan, had actually sent this prostitute. He could have rejected her immediately. He could have kicked her out. That was one thing he could have done. He could have immediately left the village and gone to another village. But he chose not to do either one of them. Why? Because he showed compassion on that prostitute. He showed compassion on her. And not only did he show compassion on her, he wanted to save her, but also he never compromised on his sadhana. So this is the important point where we talked about balance between compassion and compromise. He never compromised on his sadhana. So now let's look at 3 lessons that we get from Bharat Maharaj. The first lesson is that the initial compassion towards the baby deer that Bharat Maharaj showed was not wrong, as we read in the Padma Puran verse. The second lesson is that he did it in the case of Apad Dharma. So what does that mean? So he had already renounced his family members, kingdom, everything. As we discussed, he was in Bhagavad Dharma. And the mistake that he did was he did not go back. He did not focus back on Bhagavad Dharma. Another simple material example that you can think of is, let's say someone gets into Harvard school. They put in all the effort. They study a lot. They finally get into Harvard school. And because of an attachment towards a puppy dog or something like that, they neglect their studies. This is exactly what happened in the case of Bharat Maharaj. So compromising one's sadhana to the extent of completely ignoring it is detrimental to one's devotion. But God's protection was there. Even though he lost his human body, his spiritual attraction was protected in his next life. Now let's turn towards Indradyumna Maharaj. So what happened in that case? So here we learn an important lesson on what should be our mood during our absorption, even amidst the greatest reversals. So this pastime of Gajendra's previous life, Indradyumna Maharaj, occurs in just 5 verses in the Srimad Bhagavatam. In the 8th canto, 4th chapter, verse 8 to verse 12, in just these 5 verses, this pastime is depicted, and there are so many lessons for us to learn. So the first thing that we can learn is that in this verse 8.4.8, there are 6 ornaments glorifying, 6 adjectives glorifying Indradyumna Maharaj. What are the 6 ornaments? The first one is Jatadaras. That means he was extremely detached. He gave up his royalty. The second ornament is Tapasa. He was extremely austere. The third ornament, he was Apluto. He was experiencing ecstasy while he was meditating and while he was in this Bhagavad Dharma, practicing Krishna consciousness completely. He was experiencing ecstasy. The next thing is Samarchayam. So he was worshipping perfectly. There was nothing wrong in his worship, in his daily worship. The next ornament is that his object of worship was also perfect. He was worshipping Achyuta. He was worshipping Krishna himself. So everything was going perfectly for him. And the last ornament is that he was even practicing Maunavrata. He was completely sense controlled. He was able to maintain silence, and he had these wonderful ornaments. Everything was going well. He was spiritually fully accomplished. You might think that that's it, right? He's completely on the path and he's just going back home, back to Godhead. But something interesting happened at that point. So similarly, we must also expect the unexpected at any moment. At any moment in our lives, we can expect something totally unexpected. At that point, in the middle of the forest, where no one else was there, who enters? Agastya Muni enters. So this is the next verse, 8.4.9. It starts with this interesting word called Yadrichaya. Now, what does this word Yadrichaya mean? It occurs several times in Srimad Bhagavatam. It means out of one's own will. So out of his own will, Agastya Muni enters there. The translation of this verse is Indradyumna Maharaj was engaged in ecstatic meditation, worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The great sage Agastya Muni arrived there, surrounded by his disciples. When the Muni saw that Maharaj Indradyumna was sitting silent in the secluded place, he became extremely angry. Now, this is very interesting because typically when an advanced soul comes to a particular place and sees his disciple or somebody performing something so nicely, engaged completely in a deep devotion, you would not expect that advanced soul to get angry, right? So Krishna's will is inconceivable. We cannot understand Krishna's will. We cannot understand why this happened. But the problem was that Agastya Muni started expecting. He started expecting respect from Indradyumna Maharaj. So Agastya Muni expects. Agastya Muni expected respect, which he did not get. So at the least expected moment in this world, there could be a reason for a conflict. Now, we have limited control over our circumstances, but we have unlimited control over how we respond. We have unlimited control over our own consciousness. And this, dear devotees, is what makes devotees different in the way they respond to reversals. So Indradyumna Maharaj had no control on Agastya Muni's arrival. He had even lesser control over Agastya Muni's expectations and his emotions. So what could he do? The only thing that he could do is to respond in a nice way. So how anyone responds, even if highly elevated, how anyone reacts, how anyone responds, even if highly elevated, is not in our control. That brings us to the next verse, 8.4.10. So here there are 4 adjectives. Remember a couple of verses ago, we discussed 6 ornaments. Now Agastya Muni starts cursing Indradyumna Maharaj with 4 very strong negative adjectives. He says he's asadur, he's not gentle, he's duratma, he's degraded, he's akruta, he's uneducated, and he's vipravamanta, he's offensive. So he's giving like 4 very strong adjectives condemning Indradyumna Maharaj, who was just glorified 2 verses ago with 6 wonderful ornaments. Not only did he chastise him, he also cursed him to become an elephant in his next life, and immediately Agastya Muni and his disciples left the scene. So what should Indradyumna Maharaj do? What would we do in that situation? Now, when something like this happens, or anything happens to us in general, we respond to situations based on how we analyze them. For example, Shringi analyzed the situation and gave Parikshit Maharaj a curse. He analyzed it according to his perspective and immediately cursed Parikshit Maharaj. So when difficult situations arise in our lives, how should we analyze them? So we should see these incidents as the prasad or the mercy of the Lord manifesting for our own purification, for our own transformation, and for our own growth. If we don't see it as the mercy of the Lord, we will start reacting in bad ways. So what does prasad mean? So satsang helps us understand events in our life as prasad. Satsang is the association of devotees. So if we don't have the association of devotees, then it can be very dangerous. So as soon as we leave the association, our ability to interpret reality in terms of how it is connected to Krishna's will disappears completely from our vision. That is why Srila Prabhupada said the three most important things that we need in Krishna consciousness. He said association, association, and association. Because it is the satsang, the association, that informs us that whenever difficulties come in our lives, it is actually Krishna's will, and we should accept it as the mercy of the Lord. Now, let's see what happened further in this pastime. Now, Srila Prabhupada's purport in that verse that we just read is extremely profound. Srila Prabhupada gives 10 reasons here. He gives how Indradyumna Maharaj analyzed this pastime. So he gives 5 points of analysis. First thing, Indradyumna Maharaj thought, this is the Lord's desire that I should be cursed to become an elephant. It is the Lord's blessing on me. It could be because of my past misdeeds. It is a small token reaction for what I should have received, much worse that I should have received. And the fifth point of analysis is that it could be a purification of past contaminations. This is how he analyzed it. Very deep, very deep. If you can just think about it for a second, if we were in that situation, at least I can speak for myself, I would have probably left everything, right? Left all my spiritual practices. So how does Indradyumna Maharaj respond? He decided that he will continue following his spiritual practices. I will continue serving Krishna. I will remain undisturbed. Whatever happens, I will remain undisturbed. I will continue doing whatever I'm doing. And I will depend on Krishna for everything. This is how he chooses to respond. And finally, he still has two expectations from God. He still has two expectations from Krishna. What are they? The first thing is that he is confident that Krishna will protect me. He's expecting Krishna's protection. And the second expectation is that Krishna will shelter me ultimately. And it did happen. In the next life, when he was Gajendra, Krishna protected him and ultimately sheltered him. So the last verse in this pastime is 8.4.12, which concludes this pastime of Indradyumna Maharaj. It says, therefore, although in his next life he got the body of an elephant, because of devotional service, he remembered how to worship and offer prayers to the Lord. So this is all I wanted to say. But before I end, I just wanted to talk about one quick pastime. We have talked about Krishna's compassion, Krishna's protection. This year is very auspicious because this is the 125th birth anniversary of Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada was born in 1896. So this is a very special year for all of us. So I just wanted to share one example of Srila Prabhupada's compassion and his disciples' attachment. Is it okay, Ratyatra Prabhu, if I take a few more minutes, maybe like 10 minutes?
Yes, Prabhuji. I was thinking in the beginning, you can continue. Yeah, go ahead, Prabhuji. Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, we don't want to leave you, Prabhuji. That's good.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Just one quick pastime. So this is in relation between Srila Prabhupada and Hayagriva Prabhu. So Hayagriva Prabhu was born on September 2nd, 1940 as Howard. Now, what is interesting is that in the same Jaladuta that Srila Prabhupada came to the US, two American boys went back to India. Their names were Keith and Howard. So they went to India while Prabhupada came to US at the same time. And they went to India in search of a guru. So they spent 6 to 8 months in India. They got sick in India, they got malaria, they got typhoid, and they met a lot of bogus gurus. And they were eventually very disappointed in their trip to India. They finally came back to US, to New York. And what did they find? Who did they see? They eventually came back to meet Srila Prabhupada in the Bowery in New York City. They saw this glowing saint, glowing sadhu, was wearing saffron, and they ran towards Srila Prabhupada and asked, Swamiji, are you from India? Swamiji, are you from India? Srila Prabhupada responded, yes, I am from India, and I'm holding classes on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays just around the corner in 26 2nd Avenue. Why don't you start attending those classes? Prabhupada encouraged them, why don't you start attending those classes? Srila Prabhupada even took them to 26 2nd Avenue and showed them, see, this is the place, this is where I do programs, why don't you please start coming? In the first meeting between Srila Prabhupada and Howard, Srila Prabhupada asked him, what is your occupation? And Howard responded, I am an English professor in Ohio State University. Srila Prabhupada's eyes lit up. He was extremely happy. He said, I was looking for someone who can edit my manuscripts. I have a lot of manuscripts right now. I have the second canto, I have the Nectar of Devotion, and so on. And I was exactly looking for someone to take these manuscripts and edit them. And you came at the right time. So in the first meeting itself, Srila Prabhupada gave an instruction to Howard to edit his manuscripts. Howard very soon became Hayagriva Das on September 9th, 1966. He also became Srila Prabhupada's principal editor. And also, he was Srila Prabhupada's first professor disciple. Srila Prabhupada has a lot of affection towards Hayagriva. In 1969, this was the year when New Vrindavan was flourishing, and Srila Prabhupada was looking for a temple president of New Vrindavan. Hayagriva Prabhu knew that at some point he would be asked to take on that service, but he had no intention of becoming the temple president. He had in fact made a list of arguments that whenever Srila Prabhupada would ask me to become the temple president, I'm going to present those arguments and I'm not going to take up that service. And it so happened, one particular morning, Srila Prabhupada called Hayagriva Prabhu and said, my dear Hayagriva, I have a very important service for you. Hayagriva Prabhu started thinking, I know what's coming. Srila Prabhupada wants me to be the temple president, right? He was thinking like that in his mind. But Srila Prabhupada said, it is my strong desire that you take sannyas. This took Hayagriva Prabhu by shock because he was not expecting that. And Hayagriva Prabhu started thinking, this is not what I was expecting. And he started presenting arguments spontaneously. He started saying, I do not want to take sannyas because I have so many material attachments. I have relatives, I have family, and so on and so forth. He kept going on and on and on. Srila Prabhupada defeated each of his arguments and said, don't worry about this, don't worry about that. Just chant Hare Krishna, everything will go away. Hayagriva Prabhu finally said, I will do anything except take sannyas, Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada at that point said, become the temple president of New Vrindavan. And that is how Hayagriva Prabhu became the temple president of New Vrindavan. So this pastime continues. In 1972, when Srila Prabhupada went to India, and during the famous series of lectures that Srila Prabhupada gave at the Radha Damodar temple, Hayagriva Prabhu was one of the people in the audience. He was that close to Srila Prabhupada. Then something interesting happened. After 1972, after the India trip, a lot of past conditionings of Hayagriva Prabhu came back strongly and he fell away from the movement. He was not able to follow the four regulative principles. he kind of moved away from ISKCON for a few years. But Srila Prabhupada never forgot him. It was only in 1976 that Srila Prabhupada met Hayagriva Prabhu again. So when Srila Prabhupada was in Hawaii in 1976, someone told Srila Prabhupada that your disciple Hayagriva is in Hawaii, he's right here. Srila Prabhupada immediately said, no matter what happens, grab him and bring him to me. So Prabhupada's disciples were able to find Hayagriva Prabhu and bring him to Srila Prabhupada. Hayagriva Prabhu at that point was, of course, wearing a pant and a shirt. He had no tilak, he had no devotional clothes. But as soon as he saw Srila Prabhupada, his heart melted. He touched Srila Prabhupada's feet and placed it to his head. Immediately, Srila Prabhupada, out of affection, started to request him for a service again. He said, I have so many manuscripts right now. Can you please edit them? You were my first editor. I'm always grateful for what you have done. Hayagriva Prabhu happily took that service and started editing the manuscripts again. But after Srila Prabhupada left Hawaii, and after a few months, Hayagriva Prabhu again fell down. Again, his past conditionings came back very, very strongly. And till the end, however, Srila Prabhupada never forgot Hayagriva Prabhu. In fact, in November 1977, a few days before Srila Prabhupada left the world, he asked, where is Hayagriva? Where is Hayagriva? He asked Jayadvaita Swami. He asked Kirtananda Swami, where is Hayagriva? Where is my Hayagriva? Everyone said, he has gone away, Srila Prabhupada. Why worry about him? But Srila Prabhupada kept saying, he was there for me when I needed him most. He was there for me at the beginning. He was my first editor. I am always grateful to him. Unfortunately, Prabhupada never met Hayagriva after that. But 12 years after Srila Prabhupada's passing, in 1989, Srinathji Prabhu, who many of you may know, he was in Chowpatty, Mumbai. Srinathji Prabhu was informed that Hayagriva Prabhu was in Goa. Srinathji Prabhu, as soon as he heard that, he went to Goa in search of him and found him under a covered boat. Hayagriva Prabhu said, I came here to enjoy, but I have immense pain in my lower back. Srinathji Prabhu said, don't worry about the pain. I will take you to Mumbai. I will take you to the best doctors. Don't worry about the pain. We will get it diagnosed. We will get it treated, and so on. He kept encouraging him. Of course, Srinathji Prabhu took him to Mumbai, and it was diagnosed that he had a cancer of the spine. In fact, he was also told that he had only a few weeks to live. At that point, Srila Radhanath Swami Maharaj met Hayagriva Prabhu and asked him, do you have any regrets, Hayagriva Prabhu? Do you have any regrets for anything in your life? Hayagriva Prabhu said, Maharaj, I have no regrets that I have cancer. I have no regrets that I'm in pain. I have no regrets that I'm paralyzed from waist down. But I do have one regret. When I was youthful, when I was energetic, I did not give myself completely to Srila Prabhupada. I was carried away by temptations. That is my only regret. So when he said this, Maharaj, Radhanath Swami Maharaj asked him, do you have any desires now? Do you have any wantings, any needs, any cravings right now? Hayagriva Prabhu mentioned, in 1969, Srila Prabhupada wanted me to take sannyas. And at that point, I gave so many arguments for not taking sannyas. But now, 20 years later, I want to do that for Srila Prabhupada. I want to take sannyas. Everyone was wondering, here is a devotee who is paralyzed from waist down. He cannot even move. What could he do by taking sannyas? But because it was Srila Prabhupada's desire in the first place, devotees decided to give him sannyas. So Hayagriva Prabhu became Hayagriva Swami in 1989. After the fire yajna, Radhanath Swami Maharaj recollects that he bought the sannyas danda and gave it to Hayagriva Swami. As soon as Hayagriva Swami saw the sannyas danda, through the sannyas danda, he was able to see Srila Prabhupada. He hugged the sannyas danda and started crying bitterly. I'm sorry, Srila Prabhupada. I'm sorry. I got carried away by so many temptations. But Srila Prabhupada, this is one thing I'm doing for you. This is one thing I wanted to do for you. And I've taken sannyas for you, Srila Prabhupada. I've taken sannyas for you. And in the next few weeks, he was completely Krishna conscious. Whatever he was doing, he wanted to hear Srila Prabhupada. Whomever he met, he told them about Srila Prabhupada. At that point, our Satyaraj Prabhu, Stephen Rosen, as many of you may know, he met Hayagriva Prabhu, and Hayagriva Prabhu told him, I was touched by the hand of God through my Guru, Srila Prabhupada. In this mood, Hayagriva Swami actually left the world, and just moments before he died, he raised both his hands, and as if he was looking at Srila Prabhupada, he left the world. So what is the lesson for us in this pastime is that Krishna and Guru's protection is always there. No matter how much we do, how little we do, Krishna's protection and shelter are always there. And this gives us hope in our Krishna consciousness. Lastly, I want to conclude with the summary. So compassion versus compromise is what we discussed. So Bharat Maharaj, in the case of Bharat Maharaj, we see that the compassion was in Apad Dharma and it was not wrong, but compromising on sadhana was the mistake. But even there, Krishna's protection was always there. Loss of human body happened, but not loss of spiritual attraction. We have limited control over our circumstances, as we saw in the case of Indradyumna Maharaj, but we have better control over our consciousness. We must always see incidents in our life as the mercy of the Lord, manifesting for our purification, our transformation, and our growth. And we must always have faith that Guru and Krishna's compassion is always showered on us, even though we may not see it immediately. Hare Krishna. Thank you all very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Thank you, Prabhuji, so much, Prabhuji. Such a mesmerizing talk. I wish it would go on tonight, but yeah, we have limitations. I don't know how to thank. No, I don't have words. Every step was learning. Every word was really quite pleasing and quite educative. And we'll open for questions. I hope you will bear with us.
Yeah, Prabhu.
Maybe 10 minutes somebody will be interested. It is late for people here in East Coast, but some people are in devotees are from India. So please go ahead and if you can listen more, probably answer will be more interesting. So anybody has any question, any Matajis or Prabhuji would like to ask anything to Prabhuji, this is a rare occasion.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Krishnakant here. Hare Krishna, not a question, but I mean something you said is very. I have not seen in that light. So, and that is the compassion. I mean, when we are in such difficult situations, we don't have control on our circumstances, but we can control our consciousness. I couldn't help but draw parallels with Ambarish Maharaja when the demon. When Durvasa Muni sent the demon, then he was. I mean, I was told, and I heard in some class that Ambarish Maharaja was at that point of seeing the demon as if Krishna has sent his mercy in the form of the demon. So he was not fearful. He was not scared. He was not panicked, but he was in that consciousness. And your lecture today helped me also look at that in that angle, that we don't control our circumstances, but we can control our consciousness. Thank you very much for that wonderful lecture, Prabhu.
Thank you for that wonderful point, Prabhu. It's a lesson for me also. I'm also struggling in my path. So it's whatever I said is for me also. Thank you.
So anybody else? Lot to digest, Prabhuji. So hopefully people will understand. But in the meantime, if nobody has questions, I will ask something I am also struggling with, and I see devotees are also struggling. I don't know how long it will take. So Prabhuji, I will ask something before I ask my question. You may or may not like, but we need it. So you know probably what I am going to ask. So the question is, we will make one request. It is open-ended. When you can speak to us next, please let us know when you are comfortable. So that's a request. I don't know whether you like it or not, but you have to help us. So that's one. Second thing is the problem is fear. As you said, Arjun had also fear, because fear is related to ignorance. I am seeing sometimes myself, and most often in the surrounding. Basically, we are neophyte devotees. We are we are just struck by external fears, not fear for Krishna. Externally, what will happen, what my family will tell, what people will think, I will miss something. Internally, we have that self gratification type of thing, what Arjuna had, that my relatives are there, whom I will rule over, where I will live, what is the use of the kingdom. So, how long it will take that type of fear to go? Obviously, if you are honest, as you said, if we are really Krishna conscious, absolutely that it will make you fearless. But we have that sense mood of sense gratification somewhere hiding within us. So that's why we have external fear to external surrounding situation, people whom we are known. So how long it will take, or what is that ideal way to get rid of this? Of course, Krishna is not there to speak, but we have to take ourselves with along with the sadhu shastra and guru. Obviously it will come, but most often I am seeing people are guided by external fears. So that's what is little bit surprising, even if after years of uh, learning, hearing, and other things, but we sometimes don't get rid of this, or it stays with us. We are so much conditioned rather. So maybe it is a little longer question. If you can give us a short answer,
Sure,
probably that
Prabhu.
would
I'll
help.
try my best. First of all, fear can come in multiple ways. First of all, fear towards Maya is actually a healthy sign, actually. If you are fearful of how Maya can actually trap us, cheat us, then that is a healthy sign. As far as taking care of our immediate needs, that is actually a very good point, because immediately after the verse Dehi nosmin yata dehe, where Krishna says that you're not the body, the next verse itself, 2.14, he says matras pashastu kaunteya shitosna sukadakada agama paino nityas tam stitikshasva bharata. He uses the word kaunteya and bharata, reminding Arjuna that you are in this body, you have to take care of your needs. So immediately, Krishna is making this point straight that, of course, you're not the body, you have to be on that platform in the ultimate sense, but right now, it is okay to take care of your immediate needs. It's okay to take care of your family, your responsibilities, everything. That is very, very important. So while doing that, we could be any of these four things. We could be in fear, we could be in the mood of reciprocation, we could be in duty, or we could be in love. So we should handle it in such a way that ultimately we progress out of this varnashram dharma and go to the Bhagavad Dharma. But that takes time, and we have to understand that that is our goal, but we can't neglect our immediate responsibilities, our immediate fears. We have to address them. We have to handle them. I hope that helps, Prabhuji.
Yes, Prabhuji. Yes, hopefully, yeah, that would help definitely. And one more thing, as you also mentioned, there is a fine distinction between self sense gratification and serving to Krishna. Very rarely, unless you really contemplate, it's very, very difficult to know whether I'm doing myself or for Krishna. Anything we do, we rarely analyze. So, and I have seen in my case or any other person's case, it tends to be self sense gratification than serving Krishna. So this is it's difficult. We are all human, and this is how it starts. So how it will go means faster it will go away. Like Maharaj says, when your garland, you should not think that people should look at who has made this garland, instead of how it will look nice to Lord, who is cooking in the kitchen. Maharaj class to his disciples in the early days of 90s and all. So if you are doing kirtan, people should think, it is your job to please Krishna, not that how nicely you are singing or dancing and all this. Should not have that, but still that remains. How do we quickly get rid of that type of thing?
Wonderful question, Prabhu. So this is where we must really get into this mood of introspection. We must take some time just to be with ourselves and just really question our motives before we do any activity, whether it's dressing the deities, whether it's serving, whether it's cooking, whether we're making garlands, anything. Just take a moment, pray to Srimati Radharani that this is I really want to do it for you, Krishna. I really want to do it for you, Krishna. I don't want to do it for my own ego. And that is how we cultivate the sense of humility. Otherwise, if we don't do that, we could be thinking externally that I'm doing all this, then I'm an advanced devotee. And that pride can easily set in, actually. That's why we have to always put this garland of Trinada Pisunichena Tarore Vasaishvana Amanena Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari. Always put that garland around our neck and always be in that humble state of mind. Otherwise, this pride can set in very quickly, even though externally, apparently, we may be doing services, but internally we are feeling happy that we are advancing or something like that, because we are all actually very, very tiny in one sense. There's only limited things that we can do. There's only limited number of verses we can memorize, only limited amount of seva that we can do. But one thing that we can always do is that we can keep trying to know Krishna. We can keep trying to think of Krishna. We can keep trying to go closer to Krishna in a humble state of mind. And once we start doing that, we have to keep introspecting. Are we doing that? Is my motive correct? Is my motive correct? Interestingly, the motive, only you and Krishna will know. No one else will know.
Yeah.
Externally, we can do so many things, but the real motive, only Krishna will know. So it is actually a very personal thing between you and Krishna, actually, between us and Krishna. So that's my answer.
Thank you, Prabhuji. And yeah, one more, if you told very good point is absorption. We have seen Radhanath Swami Maharaj speaking. He will be so absorbed, even dancing, chanting, or kirtan. In 6 hours, 7 hours, he can talk. Even if you can't see more than sit 2 hours or 1 hour, you will be just having problem with your leg or whatever concentration. But as you said, but recently something was published, probably you might have seen that 60-70% of people, they are not in present. So they will be either in future or past, or our mind will be wandering and all this. I have seen, compared to my wife, what she does very sincerely certain things, totally absorbed. But I try to do so many things at the same time. But that is, if I do something absorbed, I get some satisfaction. But because of this extraneous thing, so many things I have involved, I don't do justice to anything. I feel guilty about that. So how do we get absorbed in what we are doing, which is very essential? Because you know what I'm talking about. It is very difficult with, if we are in with devotees association, that is one thing, but with so many things happening at a time, work, office, home, cell phone, TV, of course we don't watch, but yeah, so lot of distraction, getting absorbed, whatever you do, even a small thing. If I mow the garden, yard and other things, we do something sincerely for Krishna, that matters most than I am doing something haphazardly here and there. That absorption, something, it comes rarely and gives a lot of joy, but it's most of the time, at least I have seen, and around the world also, absorption is very much missing. So how do we concentrate on what we are doing, so that becomes a difficult part.
Yeah, wonderful question again, Prabhu. I mean, I'm sure you know the answer better than me, but again, the point is that absorption will not come naturally to us, because there are so many temptations, as you said, and so many responsibilities, temptations, everything that are going on in our lives. But we must put in our endeavor. So this is my point, that absorption also, we must put in our absorption completely in our sadhana, in our service. We must give our 100%. And that, I don't know how else to mention, but we all have different thresholds of what our 100% is. And we all know when we are in our comfort zone, when we are out of our comfort zone. But every time you try to come out of the comfort zone and try to absorb yourself, you're actually moving, taking huge steps towards Krishna. You're taking huge steps towards Krishna. And we experience it. We experience it when we are completely absorbed in a kirtan or something like that, where we start feeling that love of Krishna. We start, and that bliss that you experience in that one moment, you will not experience it in anything that the material world offers. So what Maharaj has told several times is that when you have these moments of bliss, these moments of ecstasy, note them down and put them as a garland around yourself. So keep those moments very carefully, because it is those moments of absorption which will help you absorb further in your life. So otherwise, what can happen is you tend to forget. There will be many instances in our lives also where Krishna has reciprocated, helped us. Don't forget those moments, because it was in those moments where you were absorbed. You were absorbed and Krishna reciprocated. Keep those moments in your heart very, very carefully. And think of those moments. Think of the moments of mercy that you have received. Think of the moments of gratitude that you had in your heart. And keep bringing them back again and again. Whenever you lose interest, or whenever you start becoming lethargic, then think of these moments where you have received this mercy, and try to encourage yourself, push yourself into getting more deeper into absorption. Otherwise, if you stop getting absorbed, it's almost like riding a bicycle on a mountain. If you stop doing it, automatically we will go down. We have to keep pushing ourselves. Thank you, Prabhu. I think Krishnan Prabhu has a question.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Krishna.
This was Hare Krishna. This was a wonderful class. I'm so glad I attended, and I would have never known the story of Hayagriva Prabhu. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for connecting it in some way to the Bharat Maharaj and Indradyumna Maharaj pastime, where there is there it was the compassion of the Lord, and here it is the compassion of Srila Prabhupada, where he continued to remember Hayagriva Swami in this. So my question for you, Prabhu, and this may be a very, very mundane question. And I enjoyed I got a lot of very nice points on Apad Dharma and absorption as well in your class. So it's a question about Apad Dharma. This may be so mundane that I want to take, I want to apologize to all the devotees, because this is such an elevated class. I may be bringing the conversation down to a very material level. But, so I'm following, so I'm fairly new to Krishna consciousness, and I'm following, all regulative principles, and I'm also following not eating onion and garlic as well. But once in a while, what happens, Prabhu, is there is kind of no choice. There is no food at home, maybe we have come back from outside and everybody's hungry, and you just have to eat, maybe get a pizza or something, and you're not sure whether they put garlic in the tomato sauce. So now I started thinking about it only after hearing your class today. What do devotees do in such a case? That was my question, Prabhu. Because I tend to feel really, I tend to beat myself up, but what is the right thing to do in that case?
So thank you, Prabhu. Again, this is a very practical question. So first of all, about onion garlic specifically. If you start consuming more onion garlic, it actually tends to pull you down eventually. Over a period of time, it kind of has this effect of taking you away on your strict spiritual practices. So that is one thing. And then the second thing is, whatever may be the reason, we don't eat onion garlic because Srila Prabhupada told us not to eat. Like, in the highest sense, we don't do it because we want to do it. We want to be loyal to this movement. We want to be loyal to Srila Prabhupada, to our Guru Maharaj, and so on. But on the other hand, Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, he gives very balanced answers. He says that in the case of emergencies, when there is nothing and you're starving and things like that, and there is no other food available, like how you are saying, then rare, very, very rare exceptions, especially since you're new, of course, initiated devotees, and we can't do this, but very, very, very rare exceptions, it's okay. But as long as you understand and you beg forgiveness from the Lord, that this is a mistake that I'm doing, so please forgive me, my Lord, and I will try my best to not do this again. So that should be our mood. And with that understanding, we must strive not to consume that in the future. I hope that helps. I don't know, anyone else? Ratyatra Prabhu, do you want to say anything on this?
Yes, Prabhuji, thank you. So you gave the right answer, Prabhuji. So we have seen people, we are also in same boat, so it is not different. But as your sadhana increases, automatically without our knowledge, things will go away. You will not have to worry. Many people are worse than that. They drink. You know how much Prabhupada has transformed the people. Prabhuji knows where he was. Well, he's close to that ghetto area where people use what all they do. It automatically goes away. Once you are purified gradually, your consciousness, you will not know. You will leave it. And to your information, I was surprised. Sometime back, I was also having similar situation. We were looking for food. We asked some food for somebody. She said, can anything prepared without onion garlic? She was shocked. So I told, if you go to Delhi, go to ISKCON temple, 500 the dishes you can see, so many preparations without onion garlic. You can't even eat, and you will see what taste they are of. So everything could be possible, Prabhuji, and so there is no worry. As Prabhuji said, we are new. Things does happens to devotees also once in a while. But if you have faith, even some unthinkable happen. Temple will be closed. If you are really praying for Krishna, go there. Even temple will close. You will be surprised. Somebody will open the back door and he will give you the food prasadam also. So if you have, and you are traveling, we went for 14 days through 3 families. We all, of course, we prepared to cook. We cooked only rice and dal. Secretly going in the hotel, putting this thing cod and all. So, but we got 12 days of food every year. Wherever you went, devotees are so loving, caring. They gave a lot of food. Even we didn't have to cook. So things will happen. It is just a miracle if you see devotees' life, and especially elevated devotees. So you are in the right path, Prabhuji. I can tell. In addition to your answer, Prabhuji, yeah, things will happen. And if I may ask, Prabhuji, are you speaking from India or you are in US somewhere? No. Where are you asking this question, Krishnan Prabhu?
Thank you, Prabhu. I'm speaking from Boston, Massachusetts.
Wow, you are in a wonderful place. The temple inauguration was there recently. I don't know how far you are from the temple. You are in the wonderful place. How Radhana Swami Maharaj was appreciating all the devotees, what they have done, Niranjan Swami Maharaj. You are in the right place, Prabhuji. Yeah, you can join our call. I don't know how you joined this time. And Prabhuji speaks in New York City. You can get connected. We'll be happy to have your association. If you get a chance, you can join us. So this is the same link every time. Time is mostly same, but get connected with Prabhuji and Chaitanya Prabhuji. That would be also great. So thank you for a wonderful question. Thank you, Prabhuji, for your answer. And one last question before we go. I'm sorry we are holding up, but it is so interesting. I think, I don't know, we wanted to continue, but it's not possible. Time is the factor. So our Lakshminarayan Prabhu, he is asking, so mode of goodness plus mode of passion. I don't know whether you can read, Prabhuji, or it is only to me. Okay, please.
I can read the question.
Yes, Prabhuji.
To move from mode of goodness to pure goodness, you mentioned we need intense greed. Wouldn't greed be mode of passion? So mode of goodness plus mode of passion in this context leads to pure goodness. Or this intense greed is in mode of goodness because it is spiritual in nature. So this is, first of all, this is a verse from Srila Rupa Goswami's Padyavali. And he clearly mentions that this intense greed is actually different from the material greed that we can have. Because Again, the goal of material greed is something for us. And the goal of spiritual greed is to earn Krishna. So I always say that if we are earnest, if we have this intense greed, eventually we will earn Krishna. And to answer Krishnan Prabhu's question also, if you are just earnest to have not onion garlic, then Krishna somehow, as Ratiyatra Prabhu also mentioned, somehow miraculously you will see that you will get prasad. It just happens. It just happens. I can tell you from years of experience. But we must be earnest. We must have that desire that this is not what something I don't want to do. And then you will start seeing miracles, small miracles happen in your life. So this intense greed, Prabhuji, is different from a material greed. So it is not in the mode of passion at all. In fact, this comes completely in the mode of pure goodness. We can actually get this intense greed, which will take us to pure goodness, and it is actually in the pure goodness also. So that's my answer. I hope it helps.
Yes, Prabhu. Thanks very much, Prabhu. Just a follow up to that. Now tying this back to Radhayatra Prabhu's question. So sometimes the intense greed becomes too intense, and then in some cases, maybe if, for example, first of all, I'm not qualified or I don't have that intense greed. But if I have that intense greed and it is too intense and I prevent, let's say there's some service or something where I'll be like too enthusiastic or intense in trying to do the service, preventing other devotees from doing it, or maybe trying to please Krishna, I might offend some devotees. So how I mean, again, tying this back to when it is my emotions or my desire versus when it is the desire to please Krishna.
Yes, Prabhu. So usually when we are in the role of a manager or in some leadership capacity in ISKCON or in any organization for that matter, there will be moments where sometimes we have to chastise or sometimes we have to be strong. And this happens to all of us. At that point, we can't keep thinking, oh, am I committing offense? Am I doing this? We are doing that even that chastisement or whatever instruction that we're telling others, we are doing that as a service to the Lord. We are not doing that just for our own ego. Again, that's the question that we have to question. Am I doing it because I will get some satisfaction, or am I doing it so that purely this devotee will benefit? It is for his good that I'm correcting him. If everybody thinks that we should not correct anyone and nobody should be taught anything, then we will go nowhere actually. So that is why it is important for us to, especially in the role of manager, when there are festivals and things like that, it is okay to correct. It is totally okay to correct as long as our motive and our intentions are clean and clear in our head, So that is my answer. Of course, sometimes in the middle of a huge thing, there are several things happening. If, however, you do something, it is always okay to beg forgiveness from the devotee later on. Later on, you can always reach out to the devotee and say, hey, that moment, so many things were going on and I reacted this way. Can you please forgive me? And that requires courage actually, to reach to that devotee and actually beg forgiveness. And that is actually pleasing to the heart on both sides. And that will actually elevate your consciousness also. So it's good that you're actually thinking about this. And if it happens accidentally, it is also okay to beg forgiveness.
Thank you, Prabhu. That helps.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah, Prabhuji, as you said, just to add some small thing, that intention should be pure to just elevate someone that is there. It reminds me, I think again, Maharaj was also saying same thing. I have not heard from anywhere else, but Maharaj was telling Prabhupada was initiating one Maharaj in Amsterdam. Then nothing was in order, and a whole Netherlands TV and all the state TV, everybody is focusing on Prabhupada and disciple. Prabhupada has come there. So he was, instead of, Prabhupada was so absorbed in Krishna and the upliftment of devotee, instead of bothering who is there, what is going on, he started chastising that Maharaj left and right. So, and that Maharaj was almost, he was about to take sannyas and he was speechless. then finally Prabhupada done with that, then told, okay, now it is time, let us start yoga and other stuff, so let us continue. Then afterwards devotees asked Prabhupada, whole national television was focusing on you are chastising him left and right. So it was, and Prabhupada was, he cares the least, because his intention was very, very pure. He wanted to elevate the thing, and he wanted the devotees follow all the rules, regulations, and so that it is for their upliftment and to bring them closer to Krishna. So surrounding doesn't matter. If my consciousness is pure, I want to do right thing, I'm doing for Krishna, not my sense gratification. It hardly matters. So that's a nice, you brought out. I thought I'll just add. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you.
So I'm sorry it is already late, and I don't know, anybody is forcefully asking something, that's fine. So please unmute, and we are really, really grateful. I don't know how much, we started 5 minutes late, but please unmute and say big thanks to Prabhuji, and we will wait for another time when we'll hear from Prabhuji that when he will give us the next class. It's up to him and his schedule. So please unmute and say big Haribol 3 times from your heart for Prabhuji, Mataji and his family members. So Haribol, Haribol, Haribol.
Hari bol.
Kumar Prabhuji ki jai. Krishna Prabhupada ki jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Ki jai. Thank you everyone, all the devotees. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.